In 1955, the United States stood at a crossroads, poised to make a monumental decision about its future infrastructure. Ultimately, the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 paved the way for the vast interstate highway system we know today. But what if a different vision had taken hold, one that prioritized a nationwide high-speed rail network over sprawling highways? This what-if scenario, where the National Rail Act of the mid-1950s became the legislative triumph, presents a fascinating alternate reality, profoundly altering the trajectory of American society, economy, and environment. The impetus for this radical shift wouldn't have been a singular event. Instead, it would have been a profound convergence of intellectual, political, and societal currents, culminating in a legislative triumph that redefined American progress. A powerful and diverse coalition would have emerged, far more influential than any in our own timeline, adept at both public persuasion and intricate backroom deal-making. At its core were visionary urban planners like Lewis Mumford, whose insightful warnings against the automobile's destructive impact on cities might have found a far more receptive audience. They didn't just foresee impending traffic congestion, they envisioned the erosion of community, the dismantling of vibrant street life, and the sprawling desolation of car-dependent suburbs. Their vision was of dense, walkable, mixed-use cities, places where human interaction, local commerce, and civic life, not traffic flow or parking availability, were paramount. They championed the idea of new urbanism decades ahead of its time, arguing that efficient, high-capacity public transit was key to preserving the soul of urban centers and preventing the blight of highways. In our timeline, such highways would eventually carve through neighborhoods, displace millions, and exacerbate social inequalities. Their academic theories, once niche, found powerful, practical application. Alongside these planners were burgeoning environmental advocates, a nascent but increasingly vocal group in the mid-1950s. While widespread climate change awareness was still decades away, concrete concerns about smog in major cities, such as Los Angeles already battling severe air pollution, the alarming depletion of finite fossil fuel reserves, and the sheer volume of waste generated by an increasingly disposable, automobile-dependent society were beginning to surface with greater urgency. These advocates, perhaps bolstered by compelling scientific studies gaining wider traction, would have presented irrefutable arguments about the long-term ecological benefits of an electrified rail network. This included vastly reduced air pollution, lower reliance on finite and geopolitically volatile resources, and the preservation of vast tracts of open spaces from endless concrete expansion. They would have framed it not just as an infrastructure project, but as a crucial act of national environmental stewardship and long-term sustainability, appealing to a sense of patriotic duty to protect America's natural heritage. Crucially, forward-thinking engineers and industrial leaders also played a pivotal role. They weren't just captivated by the allure of the internal combustion engine. Instead, they recognized the inherent efficiency, scalability, and technological frontier of rail. Inspired by early European efforts, like France's growing electric train developments and intercity connections, and the groundbreaking innovations emerging from Japan, which would begin its high-speed Shinkansen project just a few years later in our timeline, these engineers would have presented detailed, compelling blueprints for a nationwide electric train network. This wouldn't be the slow, heavy freight rail of the past. It would involve cutting-edge maglev and bullet train technologies, developed and refined decades ahead of our timeline through aggressive public and private investment. This push for advanced technology wasn't just about achieving blistering speeds, it was about creating a sense of national pride and technological leadership, demonstrating American ingenuity and engineering prowess in a new, exciting arena, perhaps as a direct challenge to Soviet technological advances in space. This powerful alliance urbanists, environmentalists, and engineers would have meticulously crafted a compelling case to President Eisenhower, a former general who understood the strategic importance of efficient logistics and national connectivity. They would have argued that public funds should be invested primarily in a public good, a transportation system designed for collective benefit and national resilience rather than solely promoting individual car ownership. They would have highlighted the immense efficiency of moving large numbers of people swiftly, safely, and comfortably between major cities and their burgeoning suburbs, thereby minimizing energy consumption, maximizing land use, and fostering economic integration. The vision wasn't just about faster travel, it was about shaping a fundamentally different American lifestyle, one that was more connected, more sustainable, more equitable, and less reliant on volatile international energy markets. The political maneuvering behind such a shift would have been intricate. The coalition would have framed the National Rail Act not merely as an infrastructure bill, but as a declaration of a new American vision, a commitment to a future built on shared, cutting-edge infrastructure and collective prosperity. They would have enlisted powerful voices in Congress, perhaps targeting specific states that stood to gain immensely from new rail lines and manufacturing hubs. They might have leveraged Cold War anxieties, arguing that a robust, efficient rail network was also a matter of national security, allowing for rapid troop and resource deployment, and reducing reliance on vulnerable oil supply lines. The coalition might even have gained the reluctant support of certain elements within the automotive industry, promising them opportunities to pivot into rail component manufacturing, specialized urban vehicles, or export markets. This level of foresight and strategic planning would be key to pushing such a revolutionary idea through Congress against entrenched interests. The most immediate and dramatic impact of this divergent path would have been on urban and suburban development, fundamentally altering the physical and social landscape of the United States in ways we can scarcely imagine. In our timeline, interstate highways often carved brutal, indelible paths through the hearts of cities, displacing communities, creating immense traffic congestion, and contributing to urban decay and segregation. In a rail-centric America, this destructive force would have been largely absent, replaced by a regenerative and connective one. Instead of sprawling concrete arteries that prioritized cars over people and severed urban fabric, construction efforts would have focused on sleek, elevated tracks and grand, multimodal transportation hubs in urban centers. These hubs would become the new civic anchors, not just transit points, but vibrant commercial, cultural, and social centers. They would resemble majestic European train stations of the past, or the futuristic, highly efficient Japanese ones, seamlessly integrating high-speed rail with enhanced local public transport systems such as expanded electric streetcar networks, widespread trolleybus routes, and significantly deeper, more extensive subway systems. These hubs would house not only ticket counters and waiting areas but also bustling shops, diverse restaurants, dynamic art installations, and even integrated residential and office units. This would transform them into veritable cities within a city, dynamic destinations that drew people in, rather than merely moved them through. Downtowns would not only remain vibrant, they would thrive and intensify. Easily accessible by efficient, comfortable train travel, they would foster a renewed sense of community, local commerce, and civic pride. The economic engines of cities would be fueled by vibrant pedestrian traffic, efficient public transit, and compact development, rather than endless, unsightly parking lots that devoured valuable urban real estate. Businesses would choose to locate in downtown cores because their employees and customers could easily reach them without the hassle, expense, and environmental impact of driving and parking. This would lead to a widespread revitalization of urban cores that, in our timeline, often suffered from white flight and suburbanization. Urban decay would be significantly less prevalent, and urban renewal projects would focus on enhancing pedestrian infrastructure, integrating more green spaces and parks, and preserving historical buildings, rather than demolishing entire neighborhoods for car-centric infrastructure. The very streetscapes would be different, cleaner, quieter, and more conducive to human-scale activity. Urban sprawl, a defining characteristic of post-war America in our reality, would be dramatically curtailed. Without the overwhelming incentive of easy car access to far-flung, cheap land, developers would naturally prioritize locations near rail stations. Suburbs would evolve into something profoundly different. Instead of endless cul-de-sacs, sprawling McMansions, and vast, car-dependent strip malls, they would develop as compact, walkable communities clustered strategically around rail stations. These transit-oriented developments, TODs, would be meticulously designed for pedestrian life, with local shops, services, schools, and residences all within easy walking or cycling distance of the train station. Public spaces like parks, community centers, and vibrant local markets would be central to their design, fostering a stronger sense of local identity, social cohesion, and neighborly interaction. The concept of commuting would be revolutionized, becoming a comfortable, productive, and far less stressful experience on a quiet, efficient train. People could read, work, socialize, or simply relax during their journey, transforming otherwise wasted time into valuable personal or professional time. The iconic, car-centric culture of drive-ins, roadside motels, and vast suburban shopping malls might never fully materialize, or would exist only as niche novelties, perhaps for those rare trips to truly remote areas not served by rail. Instead, the cultural touchstones would be bustling train station restaurants, charming guesthouses near rail lines, and vibrant, pedestrian-friendly town centers that served as local gathering points. The environmental benefits of this alternate reality would be immense, multifaceted, and far-reaching, fundamentally altering America's ecological footprint and energy landscape for generations. Decades of significantly reduced gasoline consumption would mean vastly lower carbon emissions, leading to dramatically cleaner air in cities and a substantially mitigated impact on global climate change. The infamous smog that choked many American cities in our timeline, causing widespread respiratory illnesses, reduced crop yields, and environmental damage, would be far less prevalent, tangibly improving public health and quality of life for millions. This proactive, large-scale approach to emissions reduction would position the U.S. as a global leader in environmental sustainability and clean technology, potentially influencing international policy and accelerating global efforts to combat climate change, perhaps even averting some of its more severe consequences witnessed in our reality. America's dependence on foreign oil, a constant geopolitical vulnerability, a driver of numerous international conflicts, and a significant drain on national wealth in our history, would be drastically reduced. This would fundamentally alter international relationships, freeing U.S. foreign policy from the dictates of energy security and potentially leading to a more stable and peaceful global political landscape. The vast sums of money otherwise spent on imported oil could instead be invested domestically, further fueling the burgeoning rail industry, funding research into advanced rail technologies, and accelerating the development of related clean energy sectors. This shift would also necessitate and accelerate the development of domestic renewable energy sources like utility-scale solar farms, vast wind power installations, and expanded hydroelectric power facilities to fuel the electrified rail network, creating a truly self-reliant and sustainable energy economy. The very soundscape of America would be transformed, less the incessant drone of traffic, the blare of horns, and the roar of engines, more the quiet whoosh of passing trains, the gentle chatter of pedestrians, and the re-emerging sounds of nature in urban green spaces once dominated by asphalt. Rivers and natural spaces, previously bisected by highways and polluted by runoff, would remain more intact and healthier. Economically, this shift would spur the rise of entirely new industries while profoundly transforming existing ones, leading to a more diversified, resilient, and innovation-driven national economy. High-speed train manufacturing, encompassing everything from the sleek, aerodynamic engines to luxurious passenger cars and efficient freight wagons, would become a colossal economic driver. This wouldn't just be about assembly plants. It would foster deep expertise in advanced materials science, such as lightweight composites, propulsion systems like advanced electric motors and superconducting magnets for maglev, intelligent control systems, and innovative industrial design. This would create hundreds of thousands of high-paying, skilled jobs across various states, from engineering and research and development to precision manufacturing and assembly. Rail infrastructure development, the precise laying of thousands of miles of advanced tracks, which might require magnetic levitation guideways, the construction of sophisticated bridges and tunnels capable of handling high speeds, and the deployment of cutting-edge signaling, communication, and safety systems would be a massive, continuous undertaking for decades. This would require an enormous workforce of civil engineers, construction workers, electricians, and technicians, providing stable, long-term employment and driving innovation in construction techniques. Station development, ranging from grand, architecturally significant terminals in major cities to functional yet aesthetically pleasing suburban hubs, would fuel the construction and design sectors, creating iconic landmarks and stimulating vibrant local economies around each station. Associated service industries, including comprehensive rail maintenance, advanced operations management, sophisticated security systems, automated ticketing, rail-centric tourism, and a host of integrated logistics solutions, would become vital pillars of the economy, providing millions of stable jobs and diverse career paths. The American auto industry, as we know it, would shrink dramatically, though it wouldn't disappear entirely. Its focus would likely shift to smaller, more specialized electric vehicles for local use within walkable communities. This could include advanced golf cart-like vehicles, smart mobility pods for last-mile delivery, or light utility trucks for local services. It might also pivot aggressively towards exporting cars to less rail-centric nations or focusing on niche markets like specialized recreational vehicles for off-grid exploration, or even developing advanced autonomous vehicles for specific, limited use cases. This would require a significant retooling and reimagining of their business models, likely leading to more technological innovation in smaller, more efficient, and potentially autonomous vehicle design. Public transportation, as a massive employer and a publicly funded utility, would provide a consistent source of stable, well-paying jobs across the nation, contributing to a more equitable distribution of wealth and fostering a highly skilled workforce in various engineering, technical, and service fields. This wouldn't just be about building trains, it would be about creating a comprehensive, integrated national transportation system that prioritized public service, efficiency, and long-term national prosperity and technological leadership. This massive, sustained investment in public infrastructure would also have a powerful multiplier effect, stimulating local economies around stations and along rail corridors, and creating a strong foundation for future economic growth. This alternate reality wouldn't just change how Americans travel, it would fundamentally reshape the very fabric of American life and culture, leading to profound shifts in values, leisure activities, artistic expression, and daily routines. The deeply ingrained sense of personal freedom and individualism tied to the automobile, a cornerstone of the American psyche and a potent marketing tool in our timeline, would be significantly diminished. The iconic road trip, as a universal experience of spontaneous exploration and self-discovery across vast distances, would become a niche activity, perhaps for adventurers seeking truly remote wilderness areas, for those who simply enjoyed the slower pace of a traditional journey, or for specialized freight movements. Instead, the focus would be on the comfort, efficiency, and social connectivity of train travel. The joy would come from watching the landscape blur by from a plush seat, working or relaxing, or the social interaction of a bustling station. Travel would be less about the individual, solitary journey and more about the shared experience of collective mobility and the communal discovery of destinations. This shift would foster a more communal and interconnected American identity, less individualistic and isolated. Rural areas, particularly those not directly on the main high-speed rail lines, would undoubtedly experience slower development or increased isolation. While the high-speed network would connect major population centers, vast agricultural regions, wilderness areas, and smaller towns far from main lines would still require some form of local transportation, albeit on a much less extensive and trafficked road network. This could lead to a greater economic and social divide between urban and peri-urban centers and deep rural communities, creating political tensions. While feeder bus networks, local light rail, and specialized local electric vehicles could help bridge these gaps, they wouldn't fully replicate the same level of individual accessibility and spontaneity provided by a ubiquitous road network. This would necessitate creative and ongoing policy solutions, perhaps including dedicated, publicly funded rural rail lines operating at lower speeds, or robust public investments in multimodal rural transit hubs, to ensure these communities weren't left behind and didn't become economic backwaters. Delivery and logistics would need to adapt profoundly, becoming far more integrated and efficient. Long-distance freight would rely overwhelmingly on rail, with goods transported efficiently, sustainably, and in large volumes between major rail hubs across the country. The last mile of delivery, particularly for consumer goods and perishable items, would then rely on smaller, perhaps entirely electric or autonomous, vehicles operating from strategically located distribution centers near rail lines. This could lead to a more centralized, streamlined, and potentially faster distribution system for goods, significantly reducing the environmental impact of freight movement and perhaps even lowering consumer costs due to efficiency gains. Just-in-time delivery for manufacturing and retail would become more dependent on precise, highly reliable train scheduling. Culturally, this would be a very different America. Our music, movies, and advertising would celebrate sleek trains, bustling stations, and pedestrian life rather than the open road, shiny cars, and sprawling highways. Classic rock anthems about cross-country train journeys, evocative jazz compositions inspired by the rhythm of the rails, or romantic comedies unfolding in grand, bustling railway terminals would become common. Film noir might feature shadowy figures meeting on train platforms. The American landscape, instead of being crisscrossed by an unsightly, environmentally destructive network of concrete ribbons, would feature elegant rail lines seamlessly integrating with the natural environment, often elevated on slender viaducts to preserve land or tunneled beneath sensitive ecological areas to minimize disruption. These rail lines would be celebrated in art and literature as symbols of progress, connection, and harmonious coexistence with nature. Architecture would also reflect this shift, with train stations becoming modern cathedrals of travel, reflecting national pride, technological prowess, and a deep-seated commitment to public service and communal well-being. The daily routines of millions would shift dramatically. Less time spent stuck in soul-crushing traffic, more time for family, hobbies, personal development, or even productive work during commutes. Less stress from driving, less road rage, more opportunities for reading, relaxing, socializing, or simply enjoying the journey. This cumulative effect could lead to a society that values leisure, personal well-being, community engagement, and intellectual pursuits more profoundly. Children would grow up with a natural understanding and appreciation of public transit, fostering a sense of shared responsibility for collective resources and a greater awareness of their environmental impact. Furthermore, the very concept of travel itself would evolve. It would be less about the destination as an isolated point and more about the journey itself as a comfortable, often scenic, and integral part of the experience. Weekend trips to neighboring cities would become commonplace, fostering deeper cultural exchange and tourism between urban centers. The national identity might shift from rugged individualism tied to the automobile to a more collective, interconnected identity, where shared infrastructure, efficient public services, and vibrant public spaces play a central role. This would perhaps lead to a less fragmented, more communally oriented society. While the advantages of a rail-centric America appear compelling, it's crucial to acknowledge the significant trade-offs and potential challenges that would inevitably arise. No grand vision is without its complexities, and this alternate history would have its own unique set of social, economic, and political hurdles. The most frequently cited argument against a rail-centric society is the perceived loss of personal freedom and spontaneity associated with the automobile. For many Americans, especially those who came of age in the mid-20th century, the car symbolized ultimate independence, the ability to go anywhere, anytime, without relying on schedules, fixed routes, or the company of strangers. This deeply ingrained cultural element, often celebrated in American folklore, music, and advertising, would have been profoundly diminished. For spontaneous detours, rural exploration, or the convenience of hauling large, irregular loads like boats or campers, a rail-dominant society would impose significant limitations, making such activities cumbersome or highly specialized. The impact on truly rural areas would be a persistent and politically sensitive challenge. While high-speed rail would connect major population centers, vast agricultural regions, wilderness areas, and smaller towns far from main lines would still require some form of local transportation, albeit on a much less extensive and trafficked road network. This could lead to a greater economic and social divide between urban and peri-urban centers and deep rural communities, creating political tensions. This might alter the manifestations, but not entirely eliminate, the urban-rural political divide already present in American history. While feeder bus networks, local light rail, and specialized local electric vehicles could help bridge these gaps, they wouldn't fully replicate the same level of individual accessibility and spontaneity provided by a ubiquitous road network. This would necessitate creative and ongoing policy solutions, perhaps including dedicated, publicly funded rural rail lines operating at lower speeds, or robust public investments in multimodal rural transit hubs, to ensure these communities weren't left behind and didn't become economic backwaters. The initial public acceptance and the monumental funding hurdles would have been immense, even with a powerful coalition. Overcoming America's budding love affair with the car, fueled by massive marketing campaigns from the auto and oil industries and the undeniable convenience of door-to-door travel, would require a colossal and sustained public education campaign, along with an unyielding political will that transcended partisan divides. The sheer upfront investment required for laying thousands of miles of high-speed track, constructing countless state-of-the-art stations, and developing entirely new urban infrastructure would be staggering, far exceeding the initial costs of the highway system in our timeline. Sustained political consensus, resistant to changing administrations, economic downturns, and public skepticism, would be absolutely essential for such a multi-decade project. There would undoubtedly be fierce opposition from powerful lobbying groups tied to the burgeoning auto, oil, and related industries, such as tire manufacturers or road construction companies, reminiscent of the streetcar conspiracies that favored buses over electric trams in earlier decades. The political battles would be long and arduous, requiring considerable legislative skill and public buy-in. Moreover, while the environmental benefits are clear in the long term, the construction phase itself would be massive, disruptive, and costly. laying thousands of miles of high-speed rail track, which requires incredibly precise alignment and robust foundations, boring tunnels through mountains and under rivers, constructing elevated viaducts across valleys, and acquiring vast swaths of land for new corridors would involve significant environmental disruption, resource consumption, and potential displacement of communities during the initial build-out phase. While ultimately less destructive than the equivalent highway network in terms of sheer land take, habitat fragmentation, and long-term emissions, these short-term ecological and social costs would be substantial and would need to be carefully managed through public compensation and environmental mitigation efforts. Finally, the economic landscape would be fundamentally altered in a complex way, leading to both new opportunities and significant dislocations. While new rail-centric industries would boom, creating widespread prosperity and new technical expertise, the retooling and downsizing of the auto industry, along with its vast ecosystem of suppliers and related services, would inevitably lead to significant job losses and economic dislocation in regions heavily reliant on car manufacturing. Communities like Detroit, in our timeline the unchallenged heart of the auto industry, would have faced a far different, and potentially more challenging, economic transition, requiring massive federal intervention for retraining programs, industrial diversification, and social support. The power dynamics within the economy would shift significantly from private car ownership to public transportation infrastructure, which would have its own political and economic implications. In this what-if world, America embodies efficiency, connectivity, and environmental stewardship, all thanks to a fundamental choice made decades ago. It's a testament to how profoundly a single infrastructure decision, influenced by a specific confluence of ideas, political will, and technological foresight, can shape not just how we travel, but how we live, work, interact with our environment, and define our national identity. This alternate path suggests a nation that invested collectively in shared, high-quality infrastructure for the common good, fostering denser, more sustainable communities, and proactively mitigating many of the environmental and social challenges we face today in our own reality. The American dream might not be defined by a shiny car in every driveway and a sprawling house in the suburbs, but by the convenience of a high-speed train connection to any major city, a vibrant and walkable community, cleaner air, and a society that values shared prosperity, collective well-being, and environmental responsibility above all else. This version of the American dream could emphasize community, sustainability, and efficiency as core values.